Welcome back to the CNN Town Hall with Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Gentlemen, we have another audience question. This one comes from Sonny Adams of South Carolina. For you, Senator Graham.
Good evening. This is for Senator Graham. As a Republican from my beloved state of South Carolina, I feel, as many, that you have done much to undermine the president, his administration, as well as his calls to safety. And I would like to know when and how you would answer to the nearly 62 million constituents who voted Republican and want his protection and his changes.
That's really a good question. You know what I hear a lot from Republicans? Help the president more. I hear from Democrats and independents, save the country. Here's what you can expect from me, what you've gotten for the last 20 years. I want to help President Trump, but when I don't agree with him, I'm okay with saying I don't. I think his plan for immigration is becoming more realistic. I want to help him win a war we can't afford to lose. My biggest fear is not losing my job. My biggest fear is not standing up and speaking out when I know it's right.
Lindsey Graham and I have a record on national security policy. And I'll go all the way back to Ronald Reagan. I said, don't put Marines in Beirut. There was a bombing in the Beirut barracks and 134 Marines died. When we saw the war in Iraq going badly, we said, you got to fire the generals, you got to fire the Secretary of Defense if you want to win this war in Iraq. And we started the surge, and it succeeded. And then when Obama pulled the plug, we said, don't do that. Otherwise, Iraq is going to go back to hell in a handbasket. And I could go on and example after example where, with our experience and our knowledge and our background, we think we are qualified to make judgments. And for us to just go along to get along with any president, whether it be Republican or Democrat, is an abrogation of our responsibilities to the men and women in uniform and the people we represent.
And can I just talk about the times in which we live? To my Republican friends, we have a unique opportunity once in a lifetime. We've got the White House, we've got both houses of Congress, and here's the best way to succeed, is put the country ahead of the party. When I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, I got the crap beat out of me at home. Now that I'm going to support Gorsuch, I'm a hero. Here's the deal. I thought Sotomayor and Kagan were qualified even though I wouldn't have picked them. Now, all of a sudden, the people who are beating me up are going to say, why don't you do what Lindsey did as a Democrat? The best way to serve the Republican Party, I think, is put the country ahead of everything else, and it all works out.
My favorite story was when Social Security was about to go bankrupt, and two old Irishmen got together in the White House, and they came out in the Rose Garden together, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, and they said, we're going to save Social Security, and it's going to be tough and hard. That's because they had a relationship, those two old Irishmen. They used to get together and have drinks and tell old Irish jokes because Ronald Reagan established a relationship with Republicans and Democrats alike. Don't you think the American people want us to work together?
Do you think President Trump has that capacity?
I think he has that capacity. I do.
I think he's a deal maker's deal maker, and I'm going to meet him soon. We're getting closer. I haven't given him my cell number yet. I've given him the area code, but not the whole number. So
the new one. We already know he ruined the old one.
So here's the deal. He beat me and 16 other people. He beat the former First Lady and the Secretary of State. What he did was an amazing thing. We should all honor his victory. I do. And I want to help him as much as I possibly can, but I'm not going to change my view of the world. I'm not going to tell people in South Carolina, all of a sudden you can port 11 million people when I never believed you could to begin with. There's a difference between his mother and the man that killed his son. I've seen that for decades. And if the president sees that, then he'll have the best friend in Lindsey Graham and John McCain. Let me tell you about Senator McCain. Name one person who suffered more for his country than John McCain. If you want to rebuild the military, you're going to need his help.
I want to bring in another questioner.
He lies. Go ahead.
Dr. Dan Dirksen from Arizona with a question about health care for Senator McCain.
Hey, Doctor.
Senator McCain, Arizona's done really well the last couple of years. We're in the top 5 for job growth. We've almost halved our uninsured, and we're hoping for a Final Four appearance with the Wildcats. Go Cats. As a family doc, though, I'm very concerned that some of the talk and some of the plans around capping and cutting Medicaid will just shift the risk from the federal government to states, to rural hospitals, and to the physicians and the 70 million Americans who currently depend on Medicaid for coverage. Senators, how will you work to make sure that we don't return to the days of 48 million uninsured in our country, and that we don't punish cost-efficient, effective states like Arizona who've responsibly run their Medicaid program through caps and cuts in Medicaid?
Well, thank you, Doctor, and thank you for all you do. In case our other audience members don't know here, we were probably the hardest hit of any state in America. We had premiums that went up by 150%. Every one of our counties had only got down to one provider. For a while, we had one county that had no providers. So nobody was hit harder than our state was. And when you got deductibles in the thousands and copays in the thousands, it becomes, and it's still unraveling. It's our job now to do what we promised the American people in the last election, and that is to repeal and replace. And the first priority is not to leave anyone without the opportunity to have health care. That has to be, I think, the underpinning of any reforms that we may make. And I would like to give states that have experimented in a different way an opportunity to follow those experiments. What works in Arizona may not work in Massachusetts. And by the way, Massachusetts has got a pretty good program, as you know. That's the first nice thing I've said about Massachusetts in years. But the People's Republic of Massachusetts, I mean, I apologize. It was just a joke. I apologize. So let's give the states the funds, and let's let them do some experimentation as to what is best for those states. But there has to be an underlying principle, and that is we're not going to throw anybody off of health care to not be able to have the opportunity to get it. As long as that fundamental principle is there, we'll be fine.
But doing that, Senator Graham, as you come in here, has proven to be pretty hard. Republicans, as you said, control everything, and even deciding amongst yourselves, despite the fact that you've promised for repealing Obamacare for the past, 3-4 election cycles, doesn't seem like you're even close to getting there.
Well, we'll get there, I hope. If we don't, we'll pay a heavy price. We're the dog that caught the car. So the bottom line is hope Democrats will help us. I remember voting against Obamacare on Christmas Eve, the year it passed, jammed down our throats. The best thing we can do is try to get Democrats to help us. Obamacare, when we passed it, Congress was excluded, right? I said, I'm going to be noble, and I'm going to live like the average person in South Carolina. So I went into the state program. I got whacked. And I'm like 58 years old, short white guy, no kids. My premiums tripled. My deductible went up to $6,250. This is not health care reform, sir. This is just taking money from one group of people and giving health care free to another group of people. Health care reform is outcomes. If you really want to change Medicaid, make sure that a Medicaid patient doesn't have to run to the emergency room when they get sick. They actually have a doctor. To a Medicaid person out there, if you smoke, you ought to pay a little bit more. What I want to do is tie our outcomes to our own behavior, reward outcomes. Medicaid and Medicare by 2042 will consume all the money you send in taxes. So we're expanding a program that is unsustainable. When you add up the unfunded liability of Medicare and Social Security, promises made that we don't have the money for, you need $72 trillion in the next 40 years. If you want us to get out of debt, we need to deal with entitlements. To President Trump, I hope you're watching. Put something like Simpson Bowles on the table. You can't take entitlements off the table and run this country. 70% of the money that we spend in Washington is interest on the debt, Medicare, and Social Security. Here's how you fix it. Younger people, you're going to have to work a little bit longer because we all live longer.
Senator.
People in my age group, you're going to have to pay a little more and take a little less.
Hold that thought. We have a lot
Hold that
more.
thought.
Hold that thought. We have a lot more to discuss with Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham. CNN's Town Hall. We'll be right back.